Hello, I'm Bonnie Burkert, and this is Truth Be Told, Transformation, sharing tools for transformation so you can live your highest truth. What are we going to talk about today in terms of truth and reality and understanding ourselves? Well, we're going to welcome Judy Wilkins-Smith to talk more about our family ancestry and constellations. Hi, Judy.
Hi, Bonnie. It's lovely to be with you.
There's a lot to talk about here. This is a subject matter that I don't know quite as well. Certainly ancestors are quite interesting, and I know we kind of tap into, sometimes there's a conversation about past lives, but this is different. This is very more specific to our lineage. So why don't we first start with, you've got an upcoming book, so I'm going to read the title to you. It's Decoding Your Emotional Blueprint, Disentangle, Multigenerational Patterns. Okay, so let's talk about what that is and how it pertains to the subject of our show, emotional spring. I think you said cleaning. I called it clearing. So between
I
those
like both.
two words, how can we do some clearing of our emotional patterns?
Okay, so first we want to know what those are. And a good example is you're depressed, you've always been depressed, you don't look like it, but you've always been depressed, you don't know where that comes from. We have a look and find out that mom's always been depressed and grandma was depressed, and then great grandma had an event, and after that she was never the same. And so those patterns of thoughts, feelings, and actions echo all the way down to you. And the reason they're there is for you to be able to acknowledge that they exist, because once you look at a pattern and acknowledge it exists, it served its purpose. You now see what needs to stop and what needs to start, right?
Yeah.
So think of it a little bit as being like that old sweater that you can't get rid of. The one that's in the garage, the one that you go and clean out, and you go, what? Not this year, maybe next year. It's doing you absolutely no good. All it does is make you think of college days, but it's cluttering up. And if you put that away, you would open up space for something else to emerge. And this is the same. Once we have a look and identify those pesky patterns that have got us stuck, we also begin to identify that sitting right next to the one that's irritating or uncomfortable is a heart's desire that's saying, I wish, I would love to, if only. And that is tied to the new pattern that's trying to emerge through you. And it's also tied to the chapter that only you can write. So if you don't clear that out, you don't make space for the new to come in. And you're going to perpetuate the same thing. And a year from now, you and I will be talking about spring clearing again. And you're still going to be sitting with that pattern.
So I guess you've identified it and explained what it is. Do you want to jump in now to talk about some examples of how we can do that? I mean, in terms of, I'm sure people can work with you, right? And you're a lecturer and author, and with lots of information on this, but maybe you'll give us a few tips on, getting
Sure.
ourselves closer
Yeah.
to that.
So yes, I do a number of events, actually live events, but of course, not everybody can get to those, or not everybody can get to them now. So they in the book, and that was one of the reasons I wrote the book, it sets out very clearly what you can do to help yourself to identify those patterns and then to move through them. So what you want to do is, there are some tricks to this. Have a look at where you're really annoyed, irritable, sad, lost, lonely, struggling with money, whatever it is, where that big struggle is. You want to have a look at that. And then you want to write down, what do I tell myself about this? So let's take money. What do I tell myself about money? What do I make it mean about me? What do I feel when I'm around money? What do I make it mean about others? How would I like it to be? So you've identified the pattern, the one that's got you stuck, and what you say about it, think about it, feel about it. And then you're going to look at, so what would I really like it to look like? Then you're going to say to yourself, or you're going to write down, where did I first ever hear things about money? Who else in the family struggles with money? Do they struggle in a similar way? Is it different? Whose pattern may I be borrowing right now? And is it a good time for me to set that down? And when you say to yourself, I'm going to set that down, also watch for the thoughts, feelings, actions, because I have people who say, I can't. If my mother struggled, how am I going to do a different thing? That doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
Yes, but if you actually do something different, the light may also go on for mom. So it's fine to move on from those patterns.
That's interesting. You know, I don't know if this is applicable, but I'm going to give an anecdote because it's interesting because you need to kind of look. You mentioned going back and looking at your parent, perhaps grandparent. I mean, we probably don't know much further back than that. Maybe some people do. I suppose there's two thoughts. One is, what if you don't know those parents?
Yep.
And two, what if you fully understand how they were in that struggle? I mean, it's almost empathetic. For example, my father grew up in wartime Germany. It was hard. And so
Right.
he dealt with a lot of lack, and as did his father. I mean, who had to escape, just all kinds of stuff. We won't go into that whole story, but you can understand that. So I feel that I can relate to a scarcity consciousness that is inherited. And I mean, whatever, my dad's very, very successful, so it's fine, but there's still, I can still see that very conservative. And and another thing is having to work hard to get it.
Yes.
And so I'm really trying to figure this out for myself. And so as I learn about you, I'm starting to think this could be a very interesting subject to do
So
a deep
you
dive.
asked me a number of things. So um, let's start with your grandfather and your father who had that going on for them. What happens is grandfather has the scarcity, and what he says and the way he acts and reacts is going to echo down to son, because son's watching, son's feeling, son's hearing. So that's going to become a part of the son's DNA as well. So even though he may be successful, you may also find that there are points at which he's super successful and then he backs away. And it's that hidden loyalty to the pattern that came before.
Yeah.
Now, for you, what you might say is, Dad, Granddad, or Grandfather, whatever you would call him, I watched what you went through. I know what you went through, and I see it, and I see how it affected you. Watch me as I do it differently. For you who couldn't, I can. Thank you for everything that you added so that it's ignited that passion in me, and I get to do it differently. And that gives you that inner swing that says, it's okay, I can actually do that. Working hard, same thing. I had a gentleman very similar to what you're talking about who came in and said to me, I need a third job. And I said to him, what? You're making 7 figures. He said, yes, but I have to work hard. And I said to him, where's that come from? My dad worked hard. My grandfather worked hard. Yeah, they worked hard so that you could play hard. So how about you take them to Disney, or how about you do something that shows them how to play hard? Because that's the next pattern that's really trying to emerge. So what would yours be? I can put in a lot, but I don't have to work hard.
Okay. Yes. I mean, it's interesting to look at it. Now, I reference specifics to the family. We talked about that, but also I think it comes from region. It can be regional as well. We often reference a
Absolutely.
Midwestern work ethic. And so, again, now that would not be specific to DNA. So I would invite you to talk to us a little bit more for an understanding about emotional DNA.
Actually, it would speak to it, but let me talk to you about that. So your emotional DNA is created when an event occurs, and the event is significant enough that it creates an imprint on the DNA that becomes a blueprint for generations of behavior. So let's talk about the Second World War, or the Great Potato Famine, or 9/11. There are studies that have been done, and epigenetically they know that the imprint carries an impact far beyond the event. So this is what we're looking at. So
Interesting.
when I do this work, I always say your genealogy is what tells you where you belong. This shows you how and why that's important. So this is like genealogy 2.0. It shows you why the events are important. And you spoke earlier about saying, well, I may not know all those events in my family. If you don't, look at the events in your own, because those patterns will keep cycling through and they'll repeat in your own line. So if you just look at your own events, you're going to see there are patterns, and they're very likely going to link you back to your lineage.
Wow, that is very, very interesting. So, in your assessment of all of this, do you see the different? I mean, I think we know the answer, but I want to hear how you answer it. Different from the different peoples from different parts of the world. I mean, do you see are the patterns distinctive?
Yes, they're distinctive and they're different. And it's interesting also to be aware that countries have personality DNAs.
Okay, explain
So what
that.
I notice sometimes is, and you'll hear it in their language, we tattle about our family line all day long, the way that we speak all day long. We're tattling about our family system. But if you go to a country, it's the stiff upper lip for the British, right? In Montreal, one that fascinated me was, we are made for small things, and then they don't understand why they're not doing the big things, but they have this piece. In let me think, where else? South Africa, it's, well, we're a small part of the world. So we all have and in America, it's, when we're at our best, it's can do spirit. Of course we can do this. So that governs a lot of the way that we think, feel, and act. And we don't realize that it's very different in different parts of the world. I work with this when I'm working with executives. I will find that the Europeans and the Americans and the Latin Americans don't always understand each other. The one not going, well, you just get on and get to the point. Latin America wants to know all about your family before we talk. And in the South, in the US, it's the same. It's rude to just bump in there and go, okay, what are we doing today? It's, how's your mom? How's your dad? What's going on with your sister? And all of these form a fabric of relationships that tell us where and how to be successful in business.
No, that's great, and I love that, and it's very interesting. And basically, and we could chalk this up as merely tradition, but it really sounds like it's more, because it's really just it's how we operate. I mean, you're really kind of right. Our DNA
Totally.
is like an operating system in a way.
It is totally,
Yeah,
completely an operating
yeah.
system. And what's even more interesting is, we are the ones, both individually and as countries and as cultures, who create the library of thoughts, feelings, actions, reactions, which we then say, turn into mindsets, and then we say, this is the truth. But it's not. It's your truth, and you can change that anytime you want to.
Well, and I love that. I mean, truth be told, right? I mean, I really like that message. And it's interesting to look at it, because a lot of times I ask myself the question, well, what is truth? Or how does one find out one's truth? So you're inviting us with some really fascinating tools to take a closer look and not blame it on the family, not just thinking, because I think we do that with predisposition in, say, disease, correct? We have a
Yes,
predisposition towards,
yes.
some words that I don't even want to say on my show, but you know what I'm talking about. And so I mean, I certainly you mentioned epigenetics, and I come from that school of thought where not necessarily. So
Absolutely not necessarily. And we can change that. We absolutely can.
So with emotion, which you're telling us here, so this is another, so that was touching on the physical. And so you're inviting us to look at the emotional as well. So if,
Yes. And the one affects the other, right?
well, that's for sure. And I'm a big fan of sort of figuring out the emotional first, right? To kind of get to the
Yes,
root.
because it governs everything else. It tells us whether you're going to live by the stress hormones or by the really elevating and helpful hormones. And of course, that has an impact on physical.
Yes, very much. Thank you for bringing that up. I really can't emphasize that more, and I hope everybody listens well and listens again to the importance of that message, because I think there's a lot of people that feel it is a foregone conclusion that they're going to get a certain illness or they're just going to be in struggle the way their parents were. And
Right.
Judy is here, and I will echo her. I've got the platform for her to say no, it doesn't have to be.
No.
But I think it's good to kind of dig into it a little bit and look at it. And I mean, perhaps we think that there's a forgiveness aspect to it, but I don't even know if we have to go that far as clearing these patterns, cleaning these patterns.
I think so. That's an interesting thought. Is it a forgiveness aspect? It could be. Um, Forgiveness sometimes puts us in a position of getting too big and making the other person too small.
Yeah.
Whereas if we acknowledge and we can look at what good comes from this, it's a whole different ball game, because then it's back in our power and it's back for us to master and to be able to use as something that takes us further on our journey.
Yes. Okay. No, I love that. It's a great distinction. So we're identifying it, and we don't. I was going to use the word judgment. I mean, right? So that's what you were saying, that in a
Yeah,
way, like
this is the beautiful thing about this work, is there is no
we don't
judgment.
want to be that. Yeah.
We simply look at who belongs where, what happened, where did it originate, how has it affected you, what is the cost if you hold on to it, what is the benefit if you use it and reframe it and elevate it into the gold it was meant to be. Because at the site of every big train smash is the portal to opportunity. And that's really the route that you want to take, not poor me, I'm stuck and I'm struggling. For as long as you do that, you may be a victim and it may feel comfortable, but it's probably not going to serve you.
It's fascinating. I'm going to jump in really quick. This is a little bit of a sidebar, but I had one of my teachers mentioning how we love to talk about the train wreck, and how women especially, when we were referencing Sex and the City and how that's pretty much what that whole show was about. That was a big aha to let that go and stop doing that. But I realized in myself, oh, but if I tell people about my problems, they want to help me. They'll listen to me.
Yes, it's a connection point, right? And I
Yeah,
look like a
so
hero. The problem is it's a really sticky hero and you're not going to get any further. You're now repeating the family pattern. And 90% of the time, by the way, we're actually living ancient history. We're not creating an authentic future. It's only when we look at that and say, here's what needs to stop, here's what needs to start, and invest in that, and take and always look for the gold. There is always gold. There is never not gold, even in the worst situation. Take that and reframe it, because it echoed all the way through to you precisely for that reason. It was waiting for you to change it into something remarkable.
it's just it's really fascinating. It's intriguing, and it sounds like work in some ways. I mean, you're going to have to take a closer look at ourselves. But hey, I mean, that's why they call it light work, right? I mean, they don't call it light coasting. I mean,
No, they don't. And you know, the thing about systemic work and constellations though is, yes, it's work. We work hard and then we play hard at events, but we work hard and it has such an effect on people because of the way that it's done. It's a 3D process, which means that people get to engage multiple senses. They're seeing it, they're hearing it, they're touching it, they're feeling it, they're walking in it. And it becomes an embodied experience that creates that aha and shift. And often what I hear is people say, I have been working at this for 20 years, and in an hour and a half, it's shifted. So I would submit that maybe it's a little less work.
yeah, that's incredible. That is, it's true. I can definitely relate to that and look forward to and welcome it. That's what I want to say. So you mentioned systemic work. I don't know if I'm fully clear on what that is. Let us know.
Okay, so systemic work is the study of you within your system. You don't exist in a vacuum. It isn't just you. You're very deeply connected. So it's, how are you connected? How are those connections affecting you? How do you want them to affect you? What can you do with those connections? and what is your next step up. And it's also the study of what kind of emotions have got you stuck and what are the emotions that are going to get you out of that to change the pattern and elevate you to the next level.
Okay. So let's get into an emotion of how about uh, just fear, right? And fear of not belonging or fear of losing a job or something like that. Like,
Fear, I'll tell you a fear of not belonging one. So I had
okay.
somebody who came in who had a big fear around not belonging because her whole family, and you relate to this because they came from Germany, but the whole family was really stoic and didn't show much love. And she couldn't belong because she was very bubbly, had a lot of love, but she so wanted to belong to her family and she couldn't figure out how.
Okay.
And she kept saying, all they gave me were little drops of love, just little drops of love. So when we had a look, of course, it went back to the Holocaust in Germany. And I said to her, so they really had to survive. Yeah, they had to survive and they had to hide and they had to flee and there was a lot of fear. So I said, how much emotion did they have? Oh, no, there wasn't time for emotion. Oh, there wasn't enough time for emotion. There was a lot of fear. Yes, you carry the fear of not belonging. They carried the fear of not surviving. But you said they only gave you little drops of love. Look what you did with the little drops of love. Look at the love you've grown. I wonder if you don't belong greatly by taking the little pieces they gave you and growing them into something remarkable. And that changed everything. The fear was gone. She understood how she belonged. And there are always ways that we do belong. In fact, we cannot not belong.
That's great. Okay, thank you. That is a very, very helpful example, and I'm glad I asked for that. And one of the things I'm getting out of this once again is that you don't need to change the other people. You're not trying to
No,
change the other people. You are really
no,
so it's I mean it goes back to the old adage, you can't change somebody, you can just change your reaction, right? To
it
somebody.
does. You
Yeah.
can change your reaction. You can change your pattern of thought. And I have a lot of people who say to me, this is all fine. It's not going to change my family. They'll never go for it. And I go, first of all, please, if you've done this work, don't go and verbally vomit all over them because, yes, it will not change them. But what you can do is keep doing what you're doing. And I cannot tell you how many families I have who walk in and say, well, she was changing something and I liked what I saw. She didn't say much about it, so we came to investigate ourselves.
Yes. Okay. That's great, right? So that it's probably what is it? All tides, all ships rise with the tide. Something like that. I don't know if that's a good example, but I think you know
It's a
what I'm trying to
great
go for.
example. It really takes just one member of the family to start shifting. And of course, the minute you shift, nobody can react to you the same way that they did before. It's impossible. So you shift 1 degree and everything begins to pivot. May not feel like it for a while, but it will slowly pivot and people will start to shift. And as you move forward and they see that you didn't get smoked with a piece of 2x4, they're going to want to move. And
Mm.
so it happens.
How do we do multi-generational? Because that might be, as mentioned, how do we know our great great grandparents? So how
You
would one?
may not, but what you
Yeah.
may find is you know mom and dad, and mom may have stories about grandma or may not, but you can work quite close and you know that if it's a very strong reaction to things, if this has been around for you for a long while, you know that it comes from before mom, if she's had it too. So what I tend to do is I'll put up live representatives to show people, okay, here's you, here's mom, here's grandma, here's great grandma. Can you see there's a whole line of women, we don't know exactly where it started, but a whole line of women who struggled with this pattern. And can you see that this whole line is echoed down through to you so that you can change the struggle? And often that's all they need. They don't even need to know who it began with. They know somewhere flow stopped, and here is where I'm going to choose for flow to start again. And that's usually plenty.
That's epic. I'm definitely going to sit with this. This is going to be an interesting talk to listen to again. I really am very intrigued. So one of the other areas that you teach are constellations.
Yes.
So tell us what that is. Not constellations in the sky, everyone.
Yes, no. So
Yes,
no, I'm not an astronomer, I'm not an astrologer, but if you look at constellations in the sky, every single star has its place, and that place belongs only to that star. Now, in family systems, every single person has their place, and that place belongs to only that person. And that includes stillbirths, miscarriages, abortions, those who were adopted out, those who were excluded from the family, they all belong. A constellation is a process where we get you to experience your family system in 3D. So we set up representatives so that you can actually, instead of thinking about it here, you can actually see it, feel it, taste it, touch it, walk in it, which gives you that multi-sensorial experience of your system and what's happening in it, and also enables you to feel the pattern or sense what that pattern is like and change it, listening to your own language, watching your own actions. And that then begins the neuroscientific process of new neural pathways. You're wiring in new thoughts, new feelings, new actions. And so, of course, you cannot have the same life and you cannot have the same future. And it's a very powerful, shifting, transformative process.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting because one of my notes I made about you was the reference to rewiring the brain, and so I'm very curious. And so we'll talk more about that as we go. But I will ask you, Judy, how did you become informed in all of this? How did it start for you? What was the
It started for me with my father being killed and me deciding that they'd failed him in all of my disciplines in medicine because I was in the healthcare arena. And I started writing books, and I spoke to somebody who had done this work, and he said, come learn the work and I will help you with a book. So I went and learned the work and got zero help with the book, just saying. But that pulled me into the whole family piece because it was so obvious that this was a genealogy 2.0 and that there was so much that people could do with it. And then organizations asked me if I would come and work with them and their leaders. And so what I do is if I'm working with, and I work with C-suite mostly, when I'm working with them, we do a deep dive into the family and a deep dive into the career because we know that who you are as a leader began with how you are at home.
Yes.
And so, or even the other way around, how you are as a leader began with who you are at home. So what we do is we look at both and we see where the glitches are that happened at home and how they've migrated into your leadership and how we can now use those to transform and elevate you as a leader to the next level. And by the way, the minute you do it in one system, it's going to transfer back into the other system.
Bravo. I love hearing that companies are working with their executives.
Big companies, Fortune 500 and Fortune 50 companies, yes, they do.
Bravo. I mean, that's really great. Mostly US, or are you seeing it worldwide?
Well, I've been all over the world. I've been to Australia, California, Mexico, Costa Rica, South Africa, the Netherlands, England. So it's all over. I see them all over. I work with them and I work with what we call legacy families, which are those families that you read about, the important families or the big families. And a lot of them have got the money aspect figured out, but not the emotional DNA figured out. So that's where I get to go play.
Oh, incredible. So needed. I mean, and this can just, there's healing on so many levels here.
Very much.
And we're talking about levels on the individual and then the different people, as far as different tribes out there is what if you wish to call it that.
Right.
That may be not quite the right term in this reference, but you know what I'm talking about. Different people at different status levels. And I think that's great. No, how long have you been doing this?
I've been doing this now for about 12 years.
All right. I was just curious if you're seeing the results now that you've had a little bit of time down the road, feedback from people, breakthroughs that you could share.
Gosh, lots and lots and lots and lots. breakthroughs that I could share. I'll tell you one that was intriguing for me. I mean, there are so many, but there was a lady who came in, and we did a piece of work with her, and she started to cry, and she couldn't stop. And she said, "This is it. I'm always crying. I'm always crying." When we had a look at her history, her family going back 5 generations were women who had been in incredibly difficult situations and been incredibly stoic about it. There had been no emotion. And when we tapped into the fact that she was crying the tears and feeling the emotions of 5 generations that couldn't, things changed for her completely. She said, "Now I have permission for joy." In terms of finances, there are many people who've taken the work that I do, taken the events, many, many millionaires, which is lovely. They've discovered that they don't need to struggle, that it's okay to love money, yes, really okay, because money is not a commodity, it's a relationship, and relationships change. Fathers and mothers who've been excluded are welcomed back. People who've really struggled with health suddenly don't. They're happy and they're healthy. So just right across the board, there are so many.
That's great. I appreciate you giving some examples. I think it helps people understand how they could apply it to their life, because some of the concepts that you're giving are, I mean, I think it's very believable, and but it's very informed. It's very intelligent. So I want to apply it. I want to give some examples, and I appreciate you sharing to look at some of my own. So tell me about your upcoming book.
Decoding Your Emotional Blueprint was written for exactly the reason that you talk about. People want to know how to do it themselves. And for so many people, this feels or seems like a discipline that's really esoteric. Maybe it's not practical. Perhaps it's a little woo-woo. And I wanted that to go, because this is as logical as it is spiritual. It is as applicable as it is transformative, but people often don't know how. And this is really the nuts and bolts of what is systemic work, what is a constellation, how do I look at my stuff, how do I start to shift it, and how do I make a really significant change in my own life. That was the purpose of the book. That's why it's there.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Well, that's great. And we'll make sure that the link is there for everybody to find it as well. So are you seeing over the last decade plus, are you seeing people being open to this in a new way?
A lot more, because again, thank you, genealogy, they kind of opened the door, right? And there are now, I think on ancestry.com alone, more than 100 million family trees. So people are aware that there's something about my family tree. You watch them connect and they go, you look at finding your roots, and people are really overcome when they connect. But that was just the first tip of the iceberg. And people are now beginning to realize that, hold on, who I am didn't happen in a vacuum. If there is hidden power here, and if I can access that, I can move my life and I can shift the obstacles into something that's really useful. I need to pay attention. And of course, with the pandemic, people are starting right now to make those choices, those thoughts, feelings, action patterns, and they need to pay attention. This is a very timely book for exactly that. What are you going to think right now? What are you going to choose to think, feel, and become? Because it's right in your hands, and it's pretty easy for you to begin doing.
I want to go back to something you talked about before, and that was how events can inform great groups of people. So we've got our individual DNA, ancestral DNA, which obviously we're informed by those events, but in different ways. But then there's kind of a bigger collective, and I'm always really interested in collective consciousness. Is a interesting subject for me, and so I was curious what you may feel about the pandemic and where people are going to be with that, because maybe, I mean, it's been 2 years now, but maybe people had some time for self-reflection and study that they didn't have. And what does that reveal? What is that, where are we going with that?
Again, I think this is a moment in time where you can really become super conscious, where people can become aware of their thoughts, feelings, actions, right? And their connections. But there's more to it than that. You want to ask yourself, in this time, do I just see what was difficult for me? Or can I acknowledge that, hey, I built some capability here. I built some resilience. I've become adaptable. There are things that I can do that I could never have done before. Oh my goodness, I'm actually able to stretch and accomplish new careers. I can shift direction. I have time for my family. Working from home's not terrible. Have we stopped and sat down and really integrated all of the lessons, all of the information that we've learned and had? Because you'll find after any big event we have different demographics. In the Great Depression, which I've just written about, in the Great Depression, half the people, no, a great deal more than half the people, most of the people were in fear, loss, hunger, sadness. There was a lot of really difficult stuff, but there were others who went, I wonder what I can do with this. How can I turn this into an opportunity? The pandemic is no different. How can you turn what's happened into an opportunity? And are you doing that? Or are you saying, you see, there's always bad luck in my family and I just had the pandemic, and buying into that?
Right.
And it is a choice. And you want to make a conscious choice, because what you choose now is about to become your future.
Bravo. That's a slogan right there. Judy, thank you. This was very, very, very great information. And anything else that you want to share with us? I know that we have your website there. If anybody would like to find you, events, this book is upcoming. And I think that you definitely have so much to share and really are bringing a sophisticated concept to all of us that doesn't have to be hard.
Doesn't have to be hard. I think that's the one thing I'd like to say is, really, we all know how to speak the language of suffering. How about we become bilingual and speak the language of conscious elevation and happiness and kindness? And I think the other thing that I would love to leave people with is this: you are a remarkable life if only you know how to see it.
We pause with that one. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for talking with us today.
Thank you for having me. It was lovely to spend time with you.
We appreciate everybody listening, sharing, following. I'm Bonnie Burkert for Truth Be Told Transformation. Just remember, we have new episodes 3 times a week. On Mondays, Robert Hensley has the Minuteman Report at 3 p.m. live. And I have a new episode every Wednesday. And Tony Sweet, yay, Tony, we'll be live also 3 p.m. Wednesdays right here on Truth Be Told. Until the next time, everybody, be well.